Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your girl Mitzi, and this is Mitzi. Let's think about it. Today, we are thinking about a 360 perspective because let's be honest, that's something that we really need to think about. And that's the whole point of what I do is to try to help people think about things in a 360 perspective. So, luckily for me, I have Amir who is joining me on this episode to really think about this in another point of view and another perspective, right? So thank you so much, Amir, for coming on my show. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mitzi. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good, good. So let's just get right to it, right? Why do you think it's so important in this day and age to actually have a 360 perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important in any day and age, but especially now with social media and technology, I think is really a game changer, and maybe not for the better, even though it should be. There's a lot of stuff going on, not just in media, but social media that can really mislead people. Even people that are experts or have a lot of knowledge can be easily misled. And unfortunately, some of those things have consequences that, can hurt relationships,
Yeah.
families, friends, the way we operate daily. And so it's really important, I think, for people to first even recognize, what is going on. And I
Yeah.
don't think the way things are, many people even realize that. I think, that's really where the problems, we need to start with the problem. So.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think you brought up a very great point about how it's misleading and the fact that people are not they don't put themselves in a certain perspective when they're on social media. You know what I mean? They go in a one-track mind, and when they receive so much information, they get overwhelmed or they just completely get distracted on off course because now they perceive something in a certain way that is, like you said, misleading, very misleading, and I think we have to acknowledge the fact that when we go into any direction on social media, in the internet, or into anything, into school, into work, into literally everything, we can allow ourselves to accept the moment for what it is. You know what I mean? Not adding on extra things that are unnecessary, because I don't know, when I walk into a room, when I feel intimidated and allow fear to get in, that's when I close my perspective. But once I like embrace the situation for what it is, it's like, oh, it's actually a good situation to be in, and in your own thoughts, I mean, how do you handle that to make sure that you stay in a 360 perspective when you're interacting in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I think for me personally, when it comes to, for example, consuming content, I purposely make a point to consume content from maybe places that are maybe competing or maybe opposite points of view or ideas or demographics. Same thing with like friends and family, making sure that you don't only align yourself with the people or ideas that you agree with, that
Yeah.
you also continue to expose yourself to things that you don't. Especially for me, I actually make an extra point, to go after the opposing thoughts and instead of being frustrated, try to understand why. And I think in many cases, I might not change my mind, but at least I'll be more empathetic and understanding of, why people believe something that I think is, that I disagree with.
Yeah, easily said. That's perfect. So I'm curious, when did you realize that you needed to start opening your perspective?
I don't think there was a moment. I think it happened over many years. And so, I know there's been many, but one in particular belief that I had for very many years. I grew up a little bit more conservative, and talking to people along the way over the years, telling me, hey, how my perspective was, harmful or incorrect or wrong. Not any one of those conversations changed my mind, but I think the cumulative effect of all of those communications and all of those people over the years eventually, made me consider, hey, maybe I'm not right in this, and maybe I should consider, other points of views. And so I think sometimes when I apply that to others, we sometimes measure success based off of like short time periods. And so like if you think, if you believe something and I have a conversation with you and try to convince you and you don't budge, that doesn't necessarily mean that, I was unsuccessful. That's just one little step in your journey and, maybe considering changing your thought. And so I think that also applies with me and us as individuals, that we don't necessarily need an immediate result on everything immediately. So
Yeah, I like that. And I like the fact that you were just blatantly honest about how, you had that you were at that point of just not taking in other people's perspective. But then now you realize it's more of a benefit for you that you actually go seek out other people's perspective that are completely opposite of what you perceive or what you understand or what you comprehend and everything like that, because it just shows your yearning for knowledge. Even if you may not agree with the knowledge, it's the fact that to obtain knowledge is is necessary now. You know what I mean? It helps you move in your life in any direction. And I think people need to speak up about that more and acknowledge the fact that, I come to that crossroad where I realize like this needs to help myself, and that's what you did. You came to that. But I heard, that you created an app called Ponderly. I mean, can you tell me more about that?
yeah, I think that's kind of goes hand in hand with my life journey and eventually getting to a level where, I saw friends, family, and just society in general become extremely harmful. Like the disagreements became very harmful, as we can all see, on display. And so instead of just being frustrated about it, I said, let me take a shot at it with the solution. And so Ponderly, it's a social media platform, but it's also content media. So we produce our own content, and it's not specific to politics. There's 13 categories from fashion to science and sports. And so really what we do is we take important kind of trending topics and we report from both sides, and it's fact-based and short form. And so our job is to really give the full picture to the reader and to the audience and let them decide. So we are neutral as a platform. We'll never tell people, hey, what's right or wrong, but what we will do is make sure that they have kind of the whole picture so that they can make their own decision. And I think it's very different from a lot of other platforms in that most people today just say, "Hey, trust me, I'm telling you the truth," or "Trust me,
Yeah.
I'm giving you the whole picture." And our strategy is more like, "Don't trust us, but here's both sides, and then you make up your mind." So it's a little different way of doing it. We're also integrating a lot of social media, popular social media features to keep people connected, get the conversations going in a productive way, and kind of introducing gamification as well, so people get rewarded, for making productive conversations. And so it's really like an alternative to a lot of the social media and a lot of the media and the blogs that a lot of the Gen Z and millennials are consuming today.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me.
No worries.
But I do love the fact that that's what your goal is, because it is kind of, it ties along with our conversation of just having that 3%, that 360 perspective. Because like you said, I'm not telling you to think a certain way. I'm not telling you to move a certain way. I'm not telling you how to breathe and do your life, but I'm telling you, if you want to know the whole picture, here's the whole picture. You can make that decision for yourself. And to have that community where you can do that safely, I think it's necessary, because a lot of the times people don't feel safe to even start digging in deeper, you know what I mean? To find the whole story of whatever the situation may be, maybe fashion, politics, school and nature. Everybody has this one track perspective already growing up in each category. So to have the ability to just see things in a broader point of view gives you the opportunity to, let me make this decision consciously. People need to start making conscious decisions nowadays. You know what I mean? To really act and do things and not just do it just because everyone's doing it, And I think that's a great way to do this app. So I mean, I was gonna ask why you started, but let's be honest, the whole conversation kind of already determines why you started, because this was a need. This is a need. And I think my next question is, have you ever gotten to that moment yet where you realize like, wow, this is perfect, or like I like that reward moment where you know this is the right thing that you're doing and producing out into the world. Have you gotten to that point, or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably every day I have that feeling, but I also conversely have the feeling of this is tough. There's going to be challenges. I deal
Yeah,
with challenges, so I think it's a mixed emotion, and it's one of those things. It's a long term. It's a long game, and it's something that luckily I've been able to tie a good platform and kind of business idea with something that's needed, and kind of marry them and make sure that they're going in the same direction.
yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely not it's definitely it's a tough journey, and it's exciting and motivating at the same time because of the good that it can do as well. So but I think speaking also to your point about people kind of being in groups, or maybe some of the issues, the issues today really, from what I've seen, is not really the facts. It doesn't really matter what people are talking about. It's more the lack of effective communication. So people don't it doesn't even really matter who's right or who's wrong. It's that we're
yeah,
not effectively communicating. And I think if we can solve that problem, that foundational problem, then the facts will matter. And then we can get to those discussions. But, right now when people are talking, the other side isn't really listening, right? And the
yeah,
people who are talking, they're not talking to communicate both ways. They're talking to give their point, and they're talking to say, "Hey, I got you," right? Or like, "Hey, you're wrong." And that's not effective communication. That's really what is a consequence of what we have today.
yeah. That you're absolutely right. Effective communication would be able to resolve so many issues just because, goodness, so many arguments happen because people just assume before they even hear the whole story, you know? So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, goodness, that's truly something to think about. It makes you think about your own type of communication. Are you communicating effectively? And if you're not, maybe that's the reason why there's so much drama in your life because you're not even allowing the other person to be heard. Because you're right, people, they shut down right away as soon as they don't like what they hear,
Yeah.
and that is a hard thing to do, is to get all the parties to really listen. Let's
Yeah.
still listen. I
Yeah.
mean,
No,
listening is
there's a
a
good
hard thing.
Yeah, there's a good reason for it. I mean, I think everything has good and bad, and I think sometimes we want to look at things and only want to see the good. But for example, when people make up their mind or have prejudices, that those are protection mechanisms, right? If you see if you go into a dark alley and you see a bunch of guys and they're dressed a certain way and they're listening to a certain type of music or whatever, you're probably going to go the other direction. They could be the nicest guys in the world, but the
Yeah.
reason why most people will go the other street or go the other direction is because we have these prejudices that keep us safe. And
Yep.
maybe that's not the best example, but that applies to everything. And so when we hear certain things or we see people dressed a certain way or talk a certain way, we automatically start to assume, and that's kind of like a survival instinct to say, okay, like I need to watch out for myself. And I know typically people who dress like this, or typically people who talk like this, or typically people who believe this, they also do X, Y, and Z, and I need to protect myself. So I don't know if in most cases if people do it consciously, even that they're even aware of it, but it's a
Yeah.
survival thing. And in most cases, that example I gave of a bunch of teenage guys with hoodies and like late at night, typically you're right that they're up to no good. Typically if you're out 2 in the morning and you're young teenage boys, you're probably not up to any good. Now that doesn't mean that every single one of them are, but
Yeah.
I think what I'm saying is most of the time the prejudices, or many of the time prejudices, are correct and they do protect us. The problem
Exactly.
again is that we're in a connected world with all of this technology, is that we're not using our life experience, or we're not giving a fair shot to the other person to really show themselves, and we're judging based off very, very little thing. Oh, he was wearing that, or she was doing this, or whatever it is. And then we're trying to make this whole persona about a person based off something small. And that's where I think it's a lack of effective communication, is that we're just not effectively communicating, and we're not truly listening, and we're not truly talking. We're just making points.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that. I mean, I'm glad you brought that in because that is something else to consider when it comes to when we make decisions, is because, like you said, consciously, we don't automatically think about effectively communicating and considering, oh, that person's probably the nicest cuddle bear ever, and he's really sweet. But we would never know that because of that instinct of survival, of protecting ourselves first. And I think that's something that we will always do. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, we will always come to that matter of judging and putting people in these categories that they have no reason to, because of the fact of the moment, and we always have to consider the moment that we're in. And that's when it's like you have to take a second to have that 360 perspective. You have to give yourself a moment to, yes, go through the survival instincts and then reconsider and reevaluate your situation to consider, okay, I don't need to survive right now. I just was going through a day, and then you can have that benefit of the doubt of the situation, but it takes time. It takes practice for someone to even develop that, but just to have an avenue to remind yourself, okay, go through it, but remember to allow yourself to be open and express what you're feeling, because like it's such a taboo to just talk about what we're feeling, that it's hard to have that effective communication because our feelings are tied into what we do. I mean,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that it's okay to have those feelings because um, I think if we look at it in perspective, I bet most people are correct in their prejudices most of the time. The problem we get into and the conflict happens is the times that we're incorrect. And obviously, when we misjudge somebody, um, and then the other person knows about it, and then there's obviously conflict. So I don't think we need to just get rid of our prejudices, but I think we need to get rid of acting on those prejudices without knowing, right?
Yeah,
So it's okay for me to say in my head, hey, you know what? I think, Mitzi is this way because of her hair, because of the word she used, or whatever it is. But as long as I don't act on them, like I can have those, and it's okay. We shouldn't, those are natural thoughts that we have. We shouldn't just ignore that. I think that's where the key is. And same thing with communication. It's okay, to when you're talking for me to sum you up and say, okay, I know she thinks this is it, but then let me not act on it. Maybe if I want to know, I should ask you and say, hey, do you believe this? And you can answer, on your own and say, okay, no, Amir, that's not what I believe. I believe this. And so I think that's where the effective communication comes in. So yeah, I would definitely not say suppress our prejudices or suppress our, preemptive thoughts on people. It just don't act on them unless it's a life or death situation.
yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, what would you tell your younger self if you could tell your younger self anything? Now that you feel like you've grown and evolved, what
Mhm.
could you tell your younger self?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could have been a lot more open-minded. I probably thought as a matter of fact on a lot of things, and I still do. I don't think I'm free of that, and I don't know how many people actually are. But I think I would tell myself to be more open and life is a lot more complicated. Issues are a lot more complicated than it seems. I think a lot of times when we see things, and this is part of that same, I think, defense mechanism, we like to sum things up, right? And so we take
Yeah,
a little bit of data and then we say, yeah, I know everything. I got this data. I know everything. And you just know this little tiny little thing. And you even, doesn't matter how smart you are, you can only get so much information from that little bit of data. And
yeah,
so I think, that's what I would say, just to be more open and, considerate of other views and other ideas because life is not that simple. And you know, if we make life simple, you're going to have a lot more conflict because people are going to feel unheard, they're going to feel attacked. All of these things happen, and so it's better to be more open.
Very nice. That's very nice. That's different from what usually people be saying. Oh, well, that would tell their younger self something. So it's good to hear other responses like that because, life isn't as simple. It really is not. It's very complicated, but it gets a little easier the more that you learn how to communicate, openly and effectively, and not so harshly, so harshly. You know what I mean? Because sometimes we can be a little harsh with ourselves and with other people, and we don't even realize it. And then it cuts the effectiveness of the communication because of our tone or even just choices of the choice of words that we choose. Goodness, that was a mouthful. But I have a question because, I love quotes. So I, was looking up a quote about, 360 perspective, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. So if you don't mind, the quote is, strive not to be a success, but rather to be of value. So what does that make you think about?
Yeah, I mean, it could be like a square rectangle
Mhm.
thing where they could be technically the same thing, and that's where, I would say, for example, with Ponderly, where, I would say on the business side, it would be considered a success, but it's, also a value in terms of not only just my immediate life, but also to society. So I would say if you can try to make those two things the same, you can. But oftentimes, I think what that quote is getting at, they're not the same thing. And so many of the things that we consider success, at least the way I understand the quote, maybe are materialistic things or things that maybe society is telling us what is successful, or our environment is telling us what's successful, but they're not, necessarily truly a value to life, or to society, or to the planet overall. So that's how I take it.
Hey, that's fine. There's no wrong answers when it comes to your thoughts about a quote, because that's how you perceive it, and that's okay. And I love the fact that you related it to Ponderly because, hey, you're right. It does have value and it does hold its own success. So that's a great way to use it as an example so that people can visualize it in a different way as well. Sometimes there's a lot of people who need visualization to understand and perceive and recognize what's going on. So thank you. I think that's a great way to put it. So start wrapping up the show. What can be some lasting words of wisdom that you can leave my audience off with to keep thinking?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to give wisdom, but what I
You're
would say,
qualified.
like, yeah, what I would say is, just related to, our conversation, this is something I've, more and more believe, is that when it comes to, what we believe and conflict and humans and ideas and all of that, is just like the same advice I would give to my younger self, is just to be open, as much as you believe. We've all watched those movies or played those games where you think a certain way, and at the end you found out a little bit of more information. You're like, oh man, I was wrong. And so that's life. That applies to the rest of life. And so don't think that necessarily know everything, or that you're necessarily correct, because I promise you the other person thinks the same way, and we all can't be right all the time. So
Right?
I would just say, just be open, be kind, to others. And, I think that all of us will benefit in the end.
There you
So
go.
that's what
I
I would
like
leave with.
it.
Yep.
I like it. Very good. That's awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys want to know more about Ponderly, just check it out on my website. You can click right there and it goes right access so that you can download the app and get started and start thinking in a broader perspective. Open your mind, 360 it up, because let's be honest, we all need to open our perspective and really perceive things differently. So, with that being said, always, always keep thinking, y'all. Bye.